The cost of war is extensive, encompassing every battle, bombed building, fired bullet, and intercepted missile. Not only do individuals pay a steep price with their lives, but entire countries are also affected. However, determining the monetary cost of war is far from straightforward. It is challenging to quantify the number of rockets fired, the destruction of hardware, and the impact on a nation's economy when infrastructure is lost and young men are taken away from the workforce. In this analysis, we will attempt to put a price tag on the war, considering not only the past and present costs but also the long-term effects. The ripple effects of this conflict will be felt for decades, particularly in the poorest segments of both Russia and Ukraine. Let's start by examining the cost of the war for Russia and conclude with the shocking data on what the war has already cost and will continue to cost Ukraine. During the 9 months of fighting, it is estimated that Russia used between 10,000 and 50,000 shells per day. Assuming an average cost of $1,000 per Soviet-caliber artillery shell, the expenditure on artillery shells alone amounts to $5.5 billion. Additionally, it is estimated that Russia fired around 4,000 missiles during that period, with each missile costing approximately $3 million. This totals $12 billion in missile costs. Russia also suffered losses in combat aircraft and helicopters, with approximately 278 combat aircraft and 261 helicopters lost. Assuming an average cost of $18 million per combat aircraft and $10.4 million per helicopter, the aviation losses amounted to roughly $8 billion during those 9 months. Furthermore, it is estimated that Russia lost 2,897 tanks during that time period, not to mention the expenses incurred in repairing land equipment. Although the exact cost of repairs is difficult to determine, it is believed that Russia's land vehicle losses added up to approximately $20 billion. According to reports, the average cost for one Russian soldier per day on the battlefield is approximately $200. While the exact number of mobilized soldiers is unclear, reports from January suggested that Russia had an additional 500,000 conscripts ready, in addition to the 300,000 already mobilized. Taking the cost of keeping 300,000 Russian soldiers fighting for 9 months at $200 a day, the expense amounts to $16.44 billion. Considering that the war has already lasted 15 months and more soldiers will be mobilized, the total cost of paying their wages could reach around $30 billion. Additionally, reports indicate that families of deceased Russian soldiers receive compensation of 7.4 million rubles, approximately $110,000 each. Although the exact number of Russian soldiers who have died is unknown, reports suggest that around 40,000 soldiers have been killed in action, potentially resulting in a compensation payout of $4.4 billion. Furthermore, the costs of treating wounded soldiers must also be considered, bringing the total cost for deaths and casualties to an estimated $10 billion or more. While it is challenging to estimate the overall military costs accurately, some analysts believe that Russia's war efforts are costing the government and taxpayers an average of $10 billion per month. Thus, the 15 months of the war may have already cost around $150 billion. However, this figure does not account for the economic implications of losing working men, the impact on mental health in Russia, and the erosion of trust in the government. At the beginning of the war, many people expected that sanctions would cripple Russia, with predictions of a 15% contraction in the Russian economy, which would have been devastating. However, Russia's exports remained relatively healthy, and experts now suggest that the country's economy only contracted by around 2 to 3%. The IMF projected a contraction of 2% but also anticipated slight growth in the Russian economy in 2023. In contrast, Ukraine has experienced significant economic turmoil as a result of the war. Russia's economic stability can be attributed to several factors, with one important aspect being the resilience of its energy sector. Only 8% of the energy sector has been subjected to sanctions. Additionally, Russia secured a 30-year gas deal with China in February, and countries like India and China have supported Russia's oil exports. China alone doubled its purchases of liquefied petroleum from Russia between 2021 and 2022. Furthermore, the Russian central bank has played a role in stabilizing the exchange rate. Another crucial factor is the perception of the war by the international community. While many countries have criticized the conflict, a significant portion of the world remains neutral, with 59% not taking sides. Many nations, particularly in the global south, attribute the war to a proxy conflict aimed at weakening Russia and extending US global hegemony, rather than solely blaming Putin. This belief has inadvertently benefited the Russian economy in various ways. For instance, Bolivia's leader criticized the hegemony of weapons and imperialism of the US, highlighting the sentiment among many countries. While some countries refrain from pointing fingers directly, their skepticism toward the US and NATO has indirectly supported Russia. Moreover, Russia's participation in the BRICS framework, along with Brazil, India, China, and South Africa, has further mitigated economic repercussions. Many African nations have friendly relations with China, which has invested in multiple African countries through initiatives such as the Belt and Road Project. Consequently, Russia has not faced the severe economic downturn initially anticipated. The Russian billionaire class did experience significant losses, amounting to $93 billion in 2022. However, ordinary citizens in Russia have adjusted their spending habits by refraining from purchasing unnecessary items, resulting in fewer visits to malls. Economists warn that this trend may lead to long-term stagnation and a gradual erosion of living standards in Russia. The decline in Russia's goods imports by 20% and technology imports by approximately 30% in 2022 exemplifies the economic impact. Additionally, the country's car production decreased by about 67%, and other industries also witnessed declines. Meanwhile, Western arms industries thrived while the Russian arms industry experienced a slump in exports. It is important to note that some analysts argue that Russia's economy has been propped up thus far, but they anticipate trouble for the country as a global pariah in the long run. Nevertheless, Russia's GDP stands at around $2 trillion, and forecasts from institutions like the IMF project it to remain just above that level in the coming years. The predictions vary slightly, with OECD expecting a decline of 2.5% in Russia's GDP for 2023, the World Bank suggesting a 0.2% contraction, and the IMF foreseeing a growth of 0.7%. Overall, while Russia has incurred substantial costs due to the war, its economy has demonstrated resilience and stability. The anticipated economic downturn resulting from sanctions and the conflict has not materialized to the extent predicted. The war's impact on Russia's economy goes beyond the direct military expenses, and the long-term effects on various aspects, such as working men lost, mental health, and trust in the government, are yet to be fully understood. Russia has been forced to allocate a significant amount of additional funds to sustain the war, unlike Ukraine, which relies on external assistance. The cost of Russia's war varies depending on the source, making it difficult to ascertain an exact figure. According to the Special Operations Forces report, the daily cost of the war for Russia is estimated to be a massive $900 million, which amounts to a monthly expenditure of $27 billion and a total of $405 billion over the course of 15 months. While $900 million per day may not be an exact figure, it appears to be a close approximation based on available information. Despite the financial strain, Russia is unlikely to give up on the war anytime soon. However, the country has suffered significant weaknesses, particularly in its military, which is advantageous for the United States and any nation perceiving Russia as a threat. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin expressed the desire to weaken Russia to a point where it cannot repeat its actions of invading Ukraine. This has come at a great cost to both Russia and Ukraine, with many analysts considering Putin's actions as a war crime and even critics of U.S. NATO policy deeming it irrational. Nevertheless, Russia still possesses substantial military capabilities, and it is regarded as one of the world's most powerful militaries, ranking second after the USA on the Global Firepower website, with China closely behind. Russia currently maintains around 830,000 active personnel, with an additional 500,000 in reserves and paramilitary forces. However, the question remains as to how long Russia can sustain the depletion of its personnel and military assets. Recent reports indicate that Russia has incurred significant losses in terms of military equipment. Within just 2 days, Russia lost 48 artillery systems, 2 fighter jets, including the Sukhoi Su-34 valued at $40 to $50 million, and 2 helicopters, such as the Su-35, costing between $40 million and $65 million. Although Russia possesses superior military hardware compared to Ukraine, it is experiencing substantial losses. The number of tanks lost by Russia is estimated to be around 2,000 according to various sources, with some reports ranging from 1,845 to 3,511. The cost of each tank varies depending on the model, but a T-72B3, for example, is valued at approximately $250,000, and Russia has lost a considerable number of them. Additionally, Russia has reportedly lost 7 T-90Ms, each priced at around $1.7 million. However, the losses incurred by the war on Ukraine extend beyond men and machines, as it is the Ukrainian land that has been devastated, not Russian territory. When considering the aid received by Ukraine, it provides some insight into the significant expenses Russia must be incurring. U.S. military aid to Ukraine from January 2022 to January 2023 amounted to $46.56 billion, with the United Kingdom ranking second at $5.13 billion, followed by Poland at $2.55 billion. Various countries, including those with smaller GDPs, have contributed military aid to Ukraine. In terms of the percentage of GDP spent on aid, Latvia ranks first, followed by Estonia, Poland, and Lithuania. Eastern European nations, with their historical experiences and concerns about Russia's imperialistic ambitions, find supporting Ukraine to be an obvious choice. Numerous companies have also provided aid to Ukraine. For example, SpaceX, led by Elon Musk, supplied Starlink satellite equipment for internet use. Philip Morris, the company behind Marlboro, donated 500,000 packets of cigarettes, which may seem insignificant compared to the larger costs of war. Donations range from bulletproof vests, tech support, and ammunition to various military gear, medical supplies, and food. Citizens of different nations have also contributed funds, with the Czech Republic raising $171 million, and Poland and Lithuania raising even larger amounts. Humanitarian aid has also been extensive, with countries providing a wide range of items such as vaccine doses, evacuation assistance, ambulances, fire engines, hospital equipment, and various supplies. The magnitude of aid received by Ukraine indicates the significant expenses Russia must be incurring. The cost of war extends beyond weapons and military operations. It encompasses the assistance provided to refugees, the efforts of individuals such as cardinals providing support, the continuous operation of computer technology, the treatment of wounded soldiers in donated ambulances, the firefighting efforts using donated fire trucks, and the reconstruction of destroyed buildings and bombed roads. Estimating the precise daily cost of war is akin to assembling a complex jigsaw puzzle of the unobservable universe. Nevertheless, the show aims to piece together the available information to provide the best possible understanding of the puzzle. In February 2023, the Kiel Institute for the World Economy in Germany estimated that the total aid from all nations for the war in Ukraine amounted to approximately $150 billion. While this may seem like a significant sum, it is important to put it into perspective. For example, the United States spends about $50 billion each year on its war on drugs, and the United Kingdom allocates around $7 billion annually for the same purpose. When considering the collective expenditures of countries on their respective wars on drugs, the $150 billion allocated for the war on Russia appears relatively reasonable and affordable. From February 2022 to February 2023, the United States emerged as the largest contributor to Ukraine's aid, providing nearly $72 billion in military, humanitarian, and financial assistance. The European Union institutions contributed $35.5 billion, followed by the United Kingdom with $9.8 billion, Germany with $7.3 billion, Japan with $6.2 billion, the Netherlands with $3.9 billion, Canada with $3.7 billion, and Poland with $3.5 billion. Interestingly, while most countries allocated a significant portion of their aid budget to military assistance, Japan allocated minimal funds for military aid and instead focused on financial assistance. According to the Kiev School of Economics, during a 10-month period of the war in Ukraine, a staggering number of residential buildings were damaged or destroyed. This included 131,400 private houses, 17,500 apartment buildings, and 280 dormitories, resulting in estimated costs of approximately $54 billion. On average, this amounts to $5.4 billion per month. Although each month's costs may vary, considering the additional months from May, the estimated daily cost for Ukraine's loss of buildings and infrastructure, including houses and apartments, reaches $180 million. Infrastructure has also been a target of Russia's actions throughout the war. Ukraine's Ministry of Development of Communities, Territories, and Infrastructure Development reported that by the start of December 2022, Russia had destroyed or damaged 150 bridges or overpasses on state-important roads. The cost associated with this destruction was estimated at $35.6 billion. Taking into account the average costs over 15 months, the daily expenditure on bridges and overpasses reaches approximately $118 million. In addition, 3,000 educational institutions, including secondary schools, preschools, and institutes of higher education, were damaged or destroyed, resulting in costs of $8.6 billion over 10 months. This equates to daily expenses of approximately $28.67 million. Considering the cumulative costs of buildings, bridges, and educational institutions, the daily cost for Ukraine reaches $327 million. Furthermore, the Kiev School of Economics identified damages to cultural, sports, tourism, and religious facilities, which amounted to $2.2 billion over 10 months or $7 million per day. There were numerous other costs incurred during the 10-month period, as identified by the researchers at the Kiev School of Economics. These included expenses in agriculture, $6.6 billion, transport, $2.9 billion, trade, $2.4 billion, utilities, $2.3 billion, culture, sport, and tourism, $2.2 billion, healthcare, $1.7 billion, energy, $6.6 billion, electronics, $700 million, social and financial aspects, $300 million, and ecology, a massive $14 billion. Consequently, the total estimated damages for Ukraine over the 10-month period reached $137.8 billion. Over 15 months, this amounts to approximately $206.7 billion, resulting in a daily cost of $459.33 million. If we combine Ukraine's estimated damages with Russia's estimated total of $405 billion, the total cost of the war for both countries amounts to approximately $612 billion or $1.36 billion per day. However, these calculations do not even take into account the costs associated with Ukraine's military personnel. The basic pay for Ukrainian soldiers is 20,000 hryvnias, $550 per month, while frontline combatants receive a bonus of 100,000 hryvnias, $2,700 per month. With approximately 1 million soldiers at Ukraine's disposal, it is challenging to accurately determine the wages. Nevertheless, it is known that Ukraine spent 9 times more on its military in 2022 compared to 2021, with a total expenditure of about $31 billion. Compensation paid to the families of deceased soldiers is reported to be around 15 million hryvnias, $400,000 per soldier. If 50,000 Ukrainian soldiers were to die, the compensation costs would reach $20 billion. Unfortunately, this number is likely to be lower than the actual casualties. Additionally, the war has had a significant impact on Ukraine's economy, with 47% of Ukrainian companies ceasing operations in 2022. The steel industry, in particular, suffered substantial losses, and Ukraine's GDP is estimated to have decreased by 30% during the year, resulting in a loss of approximately $70 billion. Furthermore, the war has caused a massive displacement of people, with approximately 8 million refugees outside of Ukraine and an additional 5 million internally displaced individuals. The World Health Organization has reported that around 10 million people in Ukraine are at risk of developing mental disorders such as PTSD, stress, anxiety, and depression, with substance abuse cases on the rise. Over 60% of Ukrainian soldiers are said to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, which will have long-term negative effects on both the economy and society. Attempting to quantify the daily cost of these human losses and their economic and emotional impacts is nearly impossible. Human life and its immeasurable value cannot be assigned a price tag. Additionally, the long-term consequences of the war, such as the potential loss of productivity from able-bodied individuals unable to contribute to Ukraine's GDP, further complicate any cost assessment. According to the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, as of April 2023, Russia has suffered an estimated total of 189,500 to 223,000 casualties, including 35,500 to 43,000 men killed in action and 154,000 to 180,000 wounded. Ukraine, on the other hand, has suffered an estimated total of 124,500 to 131,000 casualties, including 15,500 to 17,500 men killed in action and 109,000 to 113,500 wounded in action. However, many analysts believe that these estimates could be much lower than the actual numbers, suggesting that the human cost of the war may be even greater. The impact of the war extends beyond the combatants, with the Ukrainian population at large experiencing the repercussions. Reports from human rights groups indicate a full-scale attack on the labor rights of all working people in Ukraine, with labor laws being overridden during wartime. Price hikes of 27% have already hit Ukrainians, and concerns about hyperinflation in food and energy shortages are widespread. The war's toll on Ukraine's economy, health, and social fabric will have long-lasting effects. Ukraine will bear the financial burden for many years, and the country will likely accumulate significant debt. While the Lend-Lease agreement with the U.S. provides assistance, Ukraine will eventually need to repay the debt, albeit over an extended period. The U.S. is not expected to exert pressure for immediate repayment, but Ukraine's economy will remain heavily impacted. In conclusion, the true cost of the war in Ukraine goes beyond monetary figures. It encompasses the human lives lost, the emotional toll on families, the long-term economic consequences, and the social upheaval experienced by the Ukrainian people. While it is challenging to assign a precise daily cost to these intangible aspects, the impact on individuals, communities, and the nation as a whole is immeasurable. The war has taken a severe toll on Ukraine's infrastructure, economy, mental health, and social fabric, leaving a lasting impact that will be felt for decades to come.